Okay.
Got it. All right. Hey, everybody. We've been chatting away. We act as if we just like opened a door and now people are suddenly on. Welcome, my friends. Thank you so much for coming. If you would not mind, so we can get to know each other, just putting your name, maybe where you're from. Always feel free to tell us what you're drinking, whatever it is, so we can get to know each other a little bit. Where is my chat? There it is. I like the exclamation mark, Lindsay. Oh, Delina, hi. Well, maybe we can talk after. We can stay on a little bit if we want to do that. Stop record. Thank you, honey. My husband just told me I look marvelous, everybody. Whatever. Donna, I would have known you had me with margarita. Vodka cranberry. It's good for you. Susie Beard, thank you for your support. I see your support a lot, and I see it and I notice, and I really appreciate you. Long Island. I'm originally from Queens.
Awesome. And I saw Donna was from Wisconsin, right?
Right.
Where in
Originally.
Wisconsin? Originally.
Originally, I'm from Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, Chicago area, but I now live in northern Wisconsin, but we're moving. So
Awesome. I grew up just north of Green Bay in a tiny little town.
what's the name of it?
Oh, there's
My town
another
was called
Illinois.
Shawano.
Oh, Shawano's not that tiny.
To me, it is compared to where I teach
That-
in New York City.
Oh yeah, I could see it where you I could see. Well, I'm in
Upstate New York,
Harshaw.
Moscow Mule. That sounds like a song name. Song
I'm in
title.
Harshaw between Minocqua and Rhinelander. So
Oh, very good.
yeah, it's tiny.
All right, welcome,
Wonderful.
everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And I always say moving the conversation forward. Donnie, you want to start introducing yourself?
I'm the creator of this amazing Facebook group, I must say, that keeps growing. So it's just pretty cool and getting more popular every day. We're closing in on 195,000. So
I know we need a different kind of happy hour when it hits 200, I think.
I know for sure. No, I'm retired reading specialist / special education teacher, and just found the need that we had to have. We need just better teacher training. And that's basically what this whole Facebook group is about for me.
Right. And I'm Virginia Quinn Mooney, and I was compelled after listening to Solda's story. I just didn't want to stop talking about it. And I thought if I didn't want to stop talking about it, probably every other educator, whatever role we play in education, probably did not want to stop talking about it. But I think more importantly, we have to continue to talk about it because we have to just be done with balanced literacy. Like it just has to go away. And we have to just start directly teaching our kids how to read. And I say all the time, it's incredible to me that the topic at hand is teaching kids to read, and we're still having to discuss it like it's an actual conversation, or there's two sides to the issues. It's certainly just an ask, but if you would not mind keeping your cameras on, but again, it's just an ask. And I'm always so impressed that it's a Friday night, and I say this a lot too. I just love how teachers get dinged for our summers off and, working 9 to 3. And here we are on a Friday night at 7 o'clock. So cheers to you all and your just never ending dedication. So usually what the happy hours look like, the conversation is organic. And by that, I mean, what's on the screen now is the beginning of episode 2 and it's from Emily Hanford's, these are her word, well, it's her words quoting Marie Clay a lot. But take a second and read that just to sort of bring you back to that episode. But so again, by organic, what I mean is I just sort of try to frame our thoughts and bring the episode back into focus about the one we're going to talk about. I have sample questions that can lead our discussion, or absolutely not. If there's just something you wanted to ask or you wanted to share, just please raise your hand with the emoji, or feel free to type away in the chat. But the point of this is really for you to, just share whatever it is that you're feeling or whatever it is about the podcast that you would, whatever direction you want to take it is your direction to lead. So that being said, what's guiding us now is the study guide that was created, and Emily Hanford asked, there's a woman by the name of Margaret Goldberg, and she's a literacy coach in Oakland, California. And Emily Hanford asked her to put together a discussion guide. And what she did in the discussion guide, she broke it into teacher, parent, and community. And each one has different questions. What you're looking at now, what you're reading is quotes of Marie Clay's that were included in the podcast. And for me, it was listening to it. It was the part that just made me feel incredulous. And, I'm sure all of us, as we were listening to this, we all had the same reaction. I joke all the time that I think my husband's right arm is like black and blue because we were driving and I just kept hitting him like, oh my God, oh my God. And I also know that we are all here on this call, and many of us are we're all community members, but many of us are all three. We're parents, teachers, and members of the society trying to get it right for our kids. The name of the episode is The Big Idea. So I thought our first big talking point, if anybody wants to jump in, again, just hit that hand raising emoji. What was the big idea that she was actually referring to in the episode? If anybody wants to jump on in, so we don't have to keep listening to me. Well, this is a first. Anybody? Oh, Nora, you found your way on. I'm so happy to see you.
Wasn't this about her thinking that kids learn to read just by reading?
Yeah, so actually, let me put this up too. I usually do it the other way around and we never get to that one. Thank you, Amy. I'll get there in 1 second. I begged people to raise their hand and then I go on to keep talking. But what's on here too is more of Marie's quotes and how she perceived reading. But Amy, that being said, please turn on your mic and let's start.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is fun. I felt like the big idea was that she built her system on what she thought was the way good readers read. And it turns out she was replicating the way bad readers read. And that was heartbreaking for life. It was heartbreaking for me where I sit as somebody with 2 master's degrees from Peabody at Vanderbilt in early childhood special ed and in elementary ed. Never the word dyslexia was mentioned. A mom of 2 kids with dyslexia, and I work in the Head Start, early Head Start world where everybody lives below poverty, and knowing what kind of instruction they are and aren't getting and what that means for the prison population. I feel it so personal. Also, my daughter was given reading recovery. So I have a lot of feelings, but that was my perception of the big idea. Thank you.
Did she, Amy, did you say you had a daughter with dyslexia?
2 daughters and a husband. Mhm.
And did they ever get any
Oh.
help in the school system?
No, they didn't. They didn't. They're both
And
in
let me
college
guess, you
now.
had to hire a private tutor? If I'm just.
Yep. Well, one went to a school that claimed to deal with dyslexia. They didn't do it very well. And the other one with tutoring, they're yeah, she's in the engineering school at the University of Colorado Boulder. I mean, good things can happen, but
Yeah.
it was really expensive and really hard, and we could do it, but you know, the whole like there's the equity part that I know you're getting to next week is that it doesn't have to be, and most can't.
Right, right, absolutely. Julianne, join us. Thanks.
Sure. When I was reading the questions here and it says Clay wanted students to sound like fluent readers. I think before I started learning about teaching reading, I wouldn't like see that as wrong.
Mhm.
Like, you know, how the memorizing words, yeah, you sound like a fluent reader, but you aren't necessarily a fluent reader. And so for me, by learning about the phonemes and, you know, all the different parts that I've learned in my 2.5 years since I've been on this journey to like deep dive with Donna's Facebook group.
Becca, are you
Um,
Becca? No. Can
I've,
you bring me her long charging cord real quick? Thank you.
I've just learned about wanting to be fluent readers, not just sound like fluent readers. And it sounds like when I was learning about the reading recovery program through the podcast, that yeah, like after they repeated readings and all of that might sound like fluent readers, but they aren't necessarily fluent readers. So.
Well, and I think for me, the thing that I come back to both professionally and personally, and this is a question that I have for, you know, everyone is, why is it still here and why are people white knuckling this? You know, it's like, this is a conversation that we're having now, but it's still in so many schools and the data is not helping them. You know, we are a data-driven profession, and why is it still here? What do you think, Amy?
I think that it's a lack of imagination on the part of the teacher training programs. And I think that it's the state purchasing offices who have all the power to buy the textbooks. And I think that the textbooks lock in and nurture and build those relationships, and that until you get to those people, it's not going to change.
Yeah. Linda, do you want to jump in? I saw you in the chat. Do you want to add to that?
I've been working on this for years and years and years with all my little pals, and the colleges, I've looked at the curriculum. There was a reading specialist master's degree that people were coming out of. There wasn't even an assessment class in that program, and people were graduating, and it just, in the schools, you know, you got the superintendents and the principals, they just don't understand it, and they think they're doing okay, but then they've bought these huge programs that cost lots and lots of money, so they go, oh, we just can't do that. So and they don't understand how necessary it is, even if they start little. Little is better than nothing. But it's so frustrating. I so love this group. Keep on going, guys.
I know. Well, you know, and it's funny too, because, you know, I'm not saying anything you probably don't already know, but, you know, TC has to present another curriculum, not just because of the lack of phonics and the lack of direct instruction, but they're also getting dinged for their lack of representation. And
Every school business owner.
if we could all make turnover, school's gonna have to pay for that too, and many will. Anyway, I can always go off on tangents. Shannon, I see you. Jump on in.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if I'm actually building on what was said, but I'm kind of embarrassed because I live in New York and I used to make the pilgrimage to TC every time they had a Saturday reunion. But I wanted to say that my daughter is 15. She's a ninth grader. She has always been a special education student. When she was in kindergarten, I realized that there were some, difficulties. As a teacher, I'm embarrassed to say, I had no idea what it was. I knew I did know she had a language disability, but she wasn't learning how to read. And I did get her classified. And up through for a period of time, I did send her to a private school for kids with dyslexia and language-based disabilities in Westchester County. But the commute was just too far for us. And then I brought her back home to the public school. And when she came back in the 4th grade, she did great because she had a teacher that understood how to teach dyslexia. And now my daughter wasn't classified as a student with dyslexia at that time because I was told that she didn't need the classifications. She'd still get the same program. It took me several more years to actually go ahead and actually get her evaluated and tested. And now she has a double deficit, is known to have a double deficit because she's both dyslexic, profoundly dyslexic, and she has a receptive and expressive language disorder. So not until I went to the school district with my attorney did she actually get a program that she needed. And she has now made a ton of progress. I don't know specifically like where she's reading right now, but I was talking to her tutor last night and she's doing incredibly well. And that has kind of fueled my desire to learn. And then when I listened to Soul the Story, oh my gosh, I got so incredibly angry because in kindergarten, 1st grade, when she came back in district from the private school, they were still using a balanced literacy, program. And it clearly wasn't working. And my daughter needed, very systematic, explicit instruction. And now that she's getting it and has gotten it with this tutor for about a year, she's made tremendous progress. But the other piece is they never fully, what's the right word? It's not coming to me, but fixed the receptive and expressive language disorder. So now, although she's reading so much better, she still doesn't have the language there. So it's really frustrating. And the school district was always so quick to throw all the accommodations at her instead of teaching her.
Right.
It's been.
Shannon, you remind me a lot. Legal, sorry, I thought you were done. Sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Legal came on one of the episodes. He was his sort of hashtag was Upper East Side Dad.
Yes, I missed it.
Oh, it's actually, I have a YouTube and it's recorded. That one you can see.
Oh, okay, I'll look for it.
Yeah, I've not been spectacular about recording, but that one we got, so that's good. But Emily had reached out and she asked, how's it going? Can you tell me about it? And I talked to her about Lee and she said, how was Lee? And I said, exactly how you would expect, pissed off and passionate.
Mm-hmm.
And as he should be, as you should be.
Yeah, and I've learned more about dyslexia and teaching children how to read. And I know why I actually wanted to jump in. See, I'm going off on a tangent now, and I apologize for that.
No, that's what we're supposed to do.
I'm a 3rd grade general education teacher, and my scores were the highest in elementary school this past year. And my superintendent, when I went to, unfortunately, I also work in the same district. I teach in the same district my daughter goes to school in. So I made an appointment with the superintendent, and I created a spreadsheet of like all her scores over the years and stuff. And he kept on trying to direct the conversation to, well, let's talk about what you're doing in the classroom because your scores are so high. And I kept on saying, no, we're not talking about my classroom. I'm here as a parent now. Anyway, he stopped in my room the other day and we were having the conversation, and he was talking to me about how our post-COVID scores in math have shot back up, but in language arts, they're not shooting back up. And I had the conversation with him again. That's because your teachers are still using a balanced literacy approach. And I've told him straight out, like, I don't use any of the school's curriculum anymore. Like I use what I've learned through this group and from the myriad of classes that I've taken, workshops, etc. But he said he's going to pull a committee together to look at curriculum. So I'm like, thank God. We do use foundations. It's a K, they were using foundations K-2. I was using it in third grade for the past, I've been teaching third grade for 6 years, and then I was in the primary school prior to that. And I was using the third grade curriculum, foundations curriculum for all those 6 years. I finally was able to convince administration that third grade needs to use it as well. So they just started using foundations, and all the kids are so far behind because of the pandemic and teachers not really using, the program as it should have been used. So they're really far behind, but my own class is making a lot of progress. So
I truly believe that if we were to rank them as to why kids are behind, pandemic is second.
I think you're right.
Yeah. I mean, if we're not teaching them to read, their pandemic or not pandemic, we have to teach them. Yeah. Snow, I'm glad. Shannon, thank you so much. Shannon, where in Westchester are you?
I'm in Somers.
Oh, okay.
Or the
My
West.
husband grew up in New Rochelle. And my
Oh,
sister lives there,
yeah,
so.
like a half an hour from
Yeah.
there.
Thank you so much. Snow, happy to see you back.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm just a parent, but it's interesting. I like that question. What do you believe? What did you believe about how children learn to read before you started listening to this podcast? It wasn't necessarily this podcast, but when I had my twins, I like to say both of them are gifted, but one has an extra chromosome. I was concerned, how is she going to start reading? And that's when I started delving into balanced literacy versus science of reading and a more systematic, consistent phonics approach. Linda Mood Bell has helped her, and she's now reading on grade level, which is amazing. But it's interesting, if you ask other parents out there in the community, and you try to have a discussion, whether they have a child with a disability or not, they don't necessarily want to know whether their child is reading proficiently. They just want to know whether their child is making good grades.
Right.
And then if their child is making good grades, then they don't really want to know how the system could be changed to be better because their child is doing just fine.
Right.
So while I totally agree that I think it's the state buying, materials, the State Department of Ed buying materials, mandating whether K-2 or K-3 uses a different approach other than balanced literacy, which some states have done, or I should say most states have done, definitely not South Carolina. And thirdly, it's, getting a teacher training on how to actually use the science of reading approach as opposed to a balanced literacy approach. I totally agree that, but most parents and a lot of the community don't feel a need to change anything. So it's hard to make that change with the state administrators unless you have a large amount of parents saying, yes, we need to change this to make it better. Because what they just want is their child, they don't think it's their problem. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Like-
I think there's a couple of levels to that.
Yeah.
Of course, I agree with all of it. I think, the one thing is I provide professional development, and oftentimes I'm providing professional development to teachers who believe in balanced literacy. And I have to, and I start talking about the difference, and, it's really just not the most effective way. And then I have to remind them that we actually are teaching children to read, but we're just not teaching all of the children to read. So, it's because maybe their child is successfully reading, but they just don't know that the other children are not. And I think the other thing is, before COVID, it was the assumption that kids were being taught to read well and successfully. And then COVID blew the doors open.
Right.
And, the first episode was talking about how all these parents are like, wait, what?
Yeah, because they got to see it.
You're covering the word? What?
Yeah. And so I will say that my other child, was reading like Lord of the Rings in 5th grade. And he's one of those that is, he learned to read well, as most parents would kind of think.
Yeah.
However, when I saw what Linda Mood Bell does, which is more of a science of reading approach,
Mhm.
then I began to understand it a little bit better. And, he's now in a private school, and because I can't fight against the public schools anymore, but I mean, he's now in a private school, and, he wrote an incredible paper he's in 7th grade. He wrote an incredible paper on gods and generals on a big old book, and a great, great paper. But I will have to say that almost every other sentence, he was using spell check when I was watching him write the paper. And yeah, he's one of those that reads well, and he does well now in private school, does well and has good grades, right? So I shouldn't worry about it. However, if he's using spell check for multi-syllable words that he knows because he's read big books before and he comprehends them, but he can't phonetically spell them because he doesn't know how to segment the syllables, and he's never been taught those sounds, then I would question whether any child is being taught reading well. Does that make sense? I mean, like, I know we say that not all children are being taught well by balanced literacy, but I have to say that he's if he's unable, if he's never been taught, and she says this in her podcast, in the Sold a Story, she says this over and over again. If you've not been taught the skills, but really, my advocate coined the term ABT, just suffering from ABT, ain't been taught. If he ain't been taught how to segment this. So I would question then anybody being taught by balanced literacy. Does that make? I agree with all that you're saying.
It does. Yeah. Thank you. So I'd love to hear from you. Melissa, I'm going to put you on the spot, and feel free to keep your microphone, your camera off. You said something earlier about fluency and the feel good for the teachers that I think it was just such a great point. If you feel comfortable enough expanding on that, I think that could really take us in a great direction. But feel free to tell me oh, heck no.
Oh, no, I can speak to that. So I'm a principal in an elementary school in Gwinnett County, which is episode 5, and who spent a lot of money on Lucy Calkins and some other pieces, and Faunus and Pinnell. I mean, I have a lot of that in my building. But what we've been discussing as we are moving towards the science of reading, and we've been doing this is like a 4-year journey for us. But what we've been talking about, and what I'm seeing especially my lower grades, is the struggle of my teachers who are saying our kids can't read because they're going slow, they're teaching letters. And I remember 17 years ago when we took letters, we said, oh, you're not going to teach that anymore. We're going to teach this instead. And the backlash that we felt. And now we're feeling the backlash of my kids can't read. We're used to them reading books and taking books home, and they have decodable books, but those aren't the same. And just that struggle, and it's that feel good. My teachers felt successful when their kids could read. And the 3-cueing system gives that illusion for some kids, but not all, that they can read when really they can word call. They would be amazing reporters, in my opinion, not reporters, anchor people, because they can word call fantastically, but they may not be making that comprehension. And when they get stuck, they get stuck. Now, I have a whole nother question that I want to ask about this about reading recovery, and that probably can come later. And I've asked it of a lot of people, but that's what I'm saying about fluency. It really does make teachers feel like they are successful because they hear those kids reading. And I remember when we started talking about all of this, we talked about how the kids would go home and they could read a book. The first day of school, they would come to school and they would learn and they would go home and read a book. And that would be what happened in New Zealand. They would take a book home and read a book. So that is our goal as well. And I remember talking to teachers. I still have my units that I use with parents where I had the words written in wingdings in the book, and it was on dinosaurs. And we trained parents on what kids were going to be doing and how they could figure out what those wingding words were without having anything out there. So, and I think that that is successful with, I think that for some kids, that is how they learn, or that is what they need. But for others, they need the phonics. And I think it's a struggle, but that's my opinion. But that's what I was saying about fluency.
Yeah, I read a quote that said, kids are smart enough to know that they're not reading if they're looking at the pictures. Like even the kids know, they know they're not reading. Melissa, what's the reading recovery question?
So my question involves interventions, and it involves this idea, and I re-listened to the podcast for most of the podcast today, but my question about reading recovery is, reading recovery was designed to be an intervention for kids who were not reading. They were not making the progress in their second year of school that we were expecting. So are those kids with auditory, it's not auditory processing, and it's not auditory dyslexia, there's another one. But my question was, and it would make sense because it would be the kids that are bad readers later on, reading recovery was something that was an intervention, and we took it and said, well, if it's good for the kids that are struggling, isn't it good for everybody? And do we not do that with a lot of interventions? So that was my question. And that's what I was wondering as I've watched us start to make some changes in my district.
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I think I'd like to talk to that if I could.
Please
I wrote an article on reading recovery back in 2001. I have a reading center that resulted of my own child's struggles to read back in the 1990s. And I also do professional development and training for teachers. But how I started was watching, reading recovery and wondering how to help her. And it wasn't making sense to me. So and then doing a bunch of research too. But I think that the answer to the question, as far as if something works really well in intervention and for the kids who really struggle, definitely it should work really well for everyone. Why don't we teach the same processes and methodology for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 if they work really well? And if they're not working really well, why don't we change what we're doing? In my background, I was a neonatal intensive care nurse for 10 years before I came to this in the 90s. And I always wonder that question, why is that resistant to change when, we continue for decades now that we're in the 30s, low 30s, as far as proficiency nationally at our 4th grade scores? Why do we, what is the rationale for sticking with doing more of that when it's showing that it doesn't work? In medicine, they don't do that. If it doesn't work, they shift pretty quickly. And I don't understand or don't have a concept of why that is the case. Because it's a great question. If something works really well in intervention, it's probably going to work better, even as much faster, and work really well too in tier 1. And it's also been my experience. Anyway.
And I'm sorry, that's what I think happened, is we looked at something that was designed as an intervention that was to help those, not everybody, those kids that were the outliers, the kids that were struggling. And we said, oh, well, if it helps with this child, we should do it to everybody. We don't do that in medicine. We don't say, or at least I don't think, I'm not a doctor, but we don't say, well, if this heart pill works for this group, let's give it to everybody. We don't do that, but in education, sometimes we do, instead of saying, this works for this group because this is not working. Like, it's like the idea of, I think it's like the idea of yelling louder. okay, if you can't hear something, well, I'll just yell at you louder until you get it. Well, that doesn't work. We know that. If you don't understand me, I'll just yell louder. That doesn't always work. We have to find something else. And I think that that's where I struggle with. We're now moving towards more of a structured literacy, and all of our interventions are structured literacy. We don't have something else for those kids who don't get it.
That, I am understanding your question better than I did, Melissa, the first time. So I appreciate that too, as far as if it's not, I think the whole crux of exactly what you said is if it's not working, why don't we do something different, whether it's in the classroom or an intervention? It really, I mean, how long is a reasonable amount of time, is it thought, to work with a child that isn't making progress before you say, I think it's the instruction that they're being given. Typically, it's the onus is on the child. They are either given a label or, then they're misbehaving, those kinds of things. So, it's a very complex and complicated thing, but if something isn't working, it would make sense to shift and try something else, or even pilot several things to see, what's moving the needle. But that doesn't seem to be the norm that I see in schools that we work in anyway. And I don't know why. I think that that's puzzling, because some people, and you're seeing now, thanks to Donna's page, thanks to Emily, that people are starting to open up and shift. Some, not the majority, I don't think, but there certainly are some. But there's so much emotional attachment and trauma to, oh my gosh, I have this business. I'm not a business person, nor am I an education person. I'm a nurse. And my education is, but I've got a business coach now after 25 years who's saying, wow, you were really doing things really pretty darn bad, which I knew I was. I just didn't know how to do it differently. And now I'm learning how, and it's just like, it's a breath of fresh air, but it's a little bit of a kick in the gut at first to be like, wait a minute, I've been working really hard for a lot of years, and I don't care about business, quite frankly. So I just I care about teaching people to read and how to teach reading. I don't care about business. And if I want to teach people how to read and teach reading through a business, I've got to kind of, learn more. But even then, I know I didn't know anything. It still is a little bit of a jarring kick to the ego to be like, wow, look at how bad I was, So I get that part. But I don't know. I've really been trying to figure out for 25 years what makes people make a shift. And there's a lot of teachers, I'm sure even on here, who have made the shift. And I think if we understand what helps with that, and to look for something that this is not working, how do we look for something else? And Donna's page has helped a lot with that. I think the answer to that question is really kind of a gold mine.
Well, and that's also two-pronged. Donna, when you said great marketing, did you mean great marketing on TC's part?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the balanced literacy. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, you've got these companies that are just off the charts, making so much money. And the more money they make, they have marketing, they have people that's all they do is write copy and creative graphic art, all that stuff. It's all embellished. It's all just such great looking stuff. And who wouldn't be interested in that, right? I mean, it looks so good. It must be great. But it was all a big ruse, none of it was based on the science. And I made that point earlier, is that we don't look at education in the science world, but it very much should be, needs to be.
Right. And it is great marketing. And what teacher doesn't want their classroom to have the cozy nooks and kids on pillows and reading to their teddy bear?
Right.
It sounds like the ideal world, particularly for K2. I mean, that's what we all want. But the problem is, just because they had the books in their hand, it ended there. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for joining. Jump on in, my friend. Oh, technology. You old bear.
Yeah. Hi. I wanted to chime in going back to that question about why don't we shift? If something isn't working, why don't we pivot? I've been chipping away at MTSS, IEP stuff for two of my kids who have dyslexia. And I asked this question at a meeting recently, how slow would the progress have to be in tier 3 MTSS before we started thinking about an evaluation? And what I was told was that, kids grow at their own rates. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and I think
More
there's
urban
just,
legends.
right, so much power given to like readiness, and kids are different. They go on their own trajectory. It'll click when it clicks. Just hang in there. And so I said, so as long as he's not flatlining, that's considered acceptable. And I was told by the EC director, yes. So it seemed like such a low standard for a kid. And I just wonder how much of a role that plays in it, just this idea of readiness. And that's maybe the hesitancy to shift to something different. And
But
I
Lauren,
also,
they've
yeah.
been told that. They've been told that every kid develops
know.
at their own rate. It's okay, just wait, he'll or
Yeah.
he'll be okay, especially.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's probably along the same lines of kids learn in different ways with the learning styles.
Right, exactly.
This,
Learning
and I just
styles.
wonder how much of this is just so deeply ingrained, and the idea that you just learn by being in your cozy nook and having books around you. And I also wonder about racism and classism. I'm in a university town where there's tons of private tutoring, and nobody wants to look at that too closely.
Mhm.
And so if there's 30 to 50% of kids who seem to be picking it up or are picking it up, and then there's some portion that maybe would be doing better with science-based instruction, but aren't getting a lot of attention. And then there's this other portion that's getting private tutoring that is based in the science of reading. I think it's much easier to focus on that lower end of the lack of proficiency and say, oh, these kids don't have books, and there's these poor kids, their parents aren't reading to them, than it is to look at why the other end might be inflated. And that is really difficult, I think, to talk about and to address.
One
I don't know.
of the things that Emily kept coming back to in episode 2 was it's made up. Like kids reading when they're ready, it's made up. But yet now we have the science of reading, and it's not new. It's 1980 was none of it was 70s. None of this is new, and it is literally scientifically based. And there was a great, it's already a couple of comments back, but the conversation went to science, like 100%. We should be based in the science of learning, and how the brain processes and what we can do. I have my first graders now in the classroom. Like I'll hear them saying to each other, like, I hear those neurons popping. Like we are including conversations about their brain, because the brain has to be involved and the science has to be involved. And we can't follow a program that just made it up. And it's just made up. And that's what she just kept coming back to. And I think the first quote, I hope this doesn't make everybody dizzy if I switch slides. So there's that. But then something about like she knew the science and just decided to, disregard the science. But anybody else have any thoughts or feels or want to jump in with anything? Everybody's empty, right? That's it. It's time for a refill. I understand.
So what about the comment that she was told that she had to it's been a while since I've listened to it, but something about she was told that she had to change the information, and I can't remember now. I'm sorry, I'm not making any sense. But she could be included in it if she said something. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Do you remember that part? And she was
Go ahead.
allowed, in the States, she was allowed to keep her curriculum if she said something, if she changed something, and basically it was a lie. I mean, that she,
I think Amy's neurons are popping. Go ahead, Amy.
Funny. I think that if I'm remembering what you're remembering, it was after reading first, and they were putting some
oh yes,
parameters around which curricula were going to be on the okay list, and hers wasn't. And she's like, wait, you know, again with the advocacy and her, you know, armies
Yes,
of marketers.
yes.
And she said, no, we will add this like little subsection A with phonics or whatever.
We'll
And as long
fix
as the
it,
word
right.
was there, then she got to be on the list. And she realized, I believe, that like, oh, if I'm not on the list, like I'm dead on arrival. Like there's no way.
Yeah,
And so she got herself on the list. And which is why I think, like, for me, it really comes down to teacher training and who's setting the agenda of which curricula get bought by the states. And I
true.
think if you continue to follow the money, that's where you're going to go. And if I can just pivot back to what Lauren was saying 1 second ago, you know, I don't know whether you heard at the beginning, I was saying that my girls, my daughters now in college, both of whom have like serious dyslexia, you know, we have a language rich home. We read a lot of books, you know, all the things. And people are like, because of that, your kids will be fine. We don't have to worry about you. You're a 2-parent intact family. You know, you've got books at home. Don't worry. Don't worry. And I'm like, no, I'm petrified because she can't hear rhymes. And it's not there. She doesn't have a sticky brain. This is a problem. And then I spend my professional life in the Head Start community, which again is like largely Black and brown and all below poverty. And it's like, well, what are you even going to do? Like they don't have books. Nobody's reading to them, like basically lost cause. And it's like, wait, like it doesn't matter where you are here. Like how about if we just look at the instruction? Like perhaps it's not my fault and it's not those parents' fault. It's the instruction's fault. Yeah, Diana agreed. She wouldn't change her program, just the description. Yeah, that the program didn't change. Anyway, sorry. Those are my thoughts.
Well, you know, it's not a great hill to die on if kids aren't reading under our watch, right? So let's just start to get it right. Know better, do better.
I want to say something because I think that that's an important point, Virginia, that, and I've had teachers tell me this, especially K1, 2, even 3rd grade teachers are like, I figured that they're going to get it further along. I didn't think they're going to make it to 60 years old and still not be able to read. I thought that they were going to pick it up at some point. And I see too, a lot of parents who shift to the more research aligned instruction often have a child of their own who is, you know, struggling significantly. And they're like, wait a minute, you know, that's what really, nothing will get you any more than your own child. So I think that as teachers kind of at a disadvantage, because I have these kids for this year, and then I don't know what's really going on with them when they move on. So
Right.
I think that that's important too.
Right. You know, part of it for me, so, I mean, I just, I'm one of those, like, I've always known, like, it never made sense to me. It never made sense to me to cover a word in instructing a child to read a word, you know, telling my kids to read more and more or get a running start. Like, it's just, it always just seemed nonsensical to me. But all that being said, like, I am also guilty of telling parents that they explode in January, you know, they're not ready yet. Like I am guilty of those things. And I am now, like, I'm getting trained in Norton Gillingham. I'm hosting these happy hours. I'm reading everything I can. I don't know how I have any friends anymore because this is all I talk about. And I'll like say, I'm like, listen, I'm sick of me too. Like I'm reading your thought bubble. I know it's, you know, but for me, it's my way of apologizing. to all the kids that came before me that I did say things like, they're just not ready, or, showing them a sight, encouraging them to memorize sight words. And when they were having their kids sound it out, I'm like, well, sound out high. I'm like, well, teach them that IGH says, I get it all now, but so much of this for me is it's incumbent on me to pay back those families that I needed to have done better for. And I was not all in with TC, but I still, I'm still guilty of it because I was sold a story. But anybody want to give a final thought for the evening?
Virginia, I feel the same way. I feel like I have to give back to the community because I was so ingrained and I was a balanced literacy teacher and supported it so much. And I've been on that same journey for about probably 4 years now. And I am so passionate about it. And I spend more time reading and taking classes. And it's just, I devote all my free time to this.
Yeah,
I do nothing else but read and study and try to learn and do better.
yeah. If I'm on my phone, it's science of reading. If have a book, it's again, it's, I owe them. Okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, to be fair to you, sometimes it probably does take some time for it to click for some kids, and that's how it is. But I think also I'm not an educator, but I share in kind of having a moment of reckoning, and I was not aware of this either. I didn't pay attention to proficiency rates or literacy rates. And just as a citizen of our country and of the world, I feel shame at not really having looked at it very closely. So I think, it's not all on teachers, it's all of us to share in on why haven't we looked at this until we had a kid with dyslexia or until we, whatever brought us here. So.
Right. And, this is very, very, very much like, I don't like to stay in that lane for too long. Like, all right, lick your wounds, put the guilt aside and let's go. Like, let's just go. Let's move forward. Let's start to do what's right. And I always like to wrap up our evening with the power of one. And, we're all doing it already, but I'm always trying to think of what's my next new thing that I haven't done yet that I'm going to try to do to advance this incredibly important cause. And it's the reason why we're all here. So, as you end the night, just think to yourself, like, what will your one be? And I say all the time, one new podcast that I haven't listened to, or actually one of the things that I never did before, I taught my kids how to add ED with using the voiced and unvoiced, thanks to you, Fly. And I was like, fantastic. I had no idea. I always just told them that there was 2 ways to do it. So that was my one this week. I completely taught them the phonetic way to add ED. So just enjoy your ones and come back next week and let us know what your one was. And thank you for coming, everybody. You are the best. And Mona, I saw your comment about teachers. My end goal is to be a college teacher to reach as many students as I can. That's my big goal in life. Thanks, guys.